Welcome everyone officially to How to Hire and Work with a Virtual Assistant to Grow Your Author Business with Lorna K. Bailey. I'm so delighted she's here. All right, so I'm going to do just a quick share screen here to talk about a couple things before we get underway. First, I would like to thank my sponsor in May 2025. That is Ingram. So Ingram runs a marketing program for authors and publishers. You might not be aware of it because it's relatively new within the past few years. It's called Ingram ID. And they've actually built a really multifaceted advertising program for books. It's social media advertising as well as email newsletter driven advertising. So if you're not aware of that program, just take a picture of this slide. That QR code will take you to the Ingram ID landing page where you can learn more about the program. This would probably be most appropriate for those of you who are self-publishing authors. I don't know that if I were traditionally publishing, if I would use it, but if you want to look at how you might give your work that extra boost, you can see if it fits with your overall marketing campaign. All right, let me introduce Lorna. So Lorna has been working for at least 7 years now with Moonstone Virtual Assistants, and this is the company you founded. Is that right, Lorna?
Yeah, it's my virtual assistant agency side of
Yes.
what I do.
So she has been doing this work for a nice long time now. And even before that, she was working as a virtual assistant with Jeff Goins. Some of you may know him as a writer and author in the writing and publishing community. And she started doing assistant work and executive assistant work, personal assistant work, et cetera, more than a decade ago. Um, I also just learned as we were chatting before we went live that she has been helping Marion Roach Smith for I think you said 7 years now, maybe.
Yeah, she was one of my
Um,
very first clients.
yeah, and some of you may know I've worked with Marion in the past. I was just on one of Marion's shows, so I really like that I was able, I think Lorna, you may have approached me, but I was delighted that you approached me, and I'm so delighted to present this because you have up close personal experience with writers and authors and how to work for their needs. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the share now and turn things over to you. And I won't interrupt unless there is one of those burning questions that must be
Okay.
answered.
Sounds good. Yeah, and seriously, everyone ask questions. I'm here to help. There's no stupid questions. I know hiring people can be intimidating and frustrating, and some people have good experiences and some have bad experiences. So truly, there's no dumb questions with this topic. So, okay, welcome to how to hire and work with a virtual assistant to grow your author business. I know some of you in the chat didn't necessarily want to hire a VA for your author business, but that doesn't matter. You can hire VAs to truly help you with any business. So if you're an editor, you're a freelance writer, I know there's kind of lots of different folks in Jane's audience. This isn't necessarily just author focused, but today that is kind of what my advice is going to be geared towards. But just have that in mind. You can hire VAs to truly help you with lots of aspects of the publishing process. So really quickly, briefly about me. I am married to an author. So my husband writes space opera, sci-fi. I have two Shih Tzus and I have a magical cat. He's a black cat. I live in Oregon. I absolutely love it here. I love living in the Pacific Northwest. And I love books. So I've been reading books as soon as I could get my hands on them as a kid, learn how to read. So I have a little bit of a unique perspective because I'm on the other side of things, right? So I work with authors, work with people who are entrepreneurs and sell services, products, software for authors, but I'm also on the reader side of things. And so I'm very fortunate that I get to do what I do, and I truly enjoy it. Jane briefly mentioned my background, but just really quick, I have been on both sides of publishing. So I started out as a virtual assistant in 2014, and I worked for several VA agencies. So a VA agency basically matches VAs with clients. I've been a virtual assistant for several entrepreneurs, Shayla Raquel, Marion Roach Smith, Dave Chesson. I was his executive assistant for 4.5 years. So part-time, couple hours here and there have helped some truly amazing people. And today I run Moonstone Virtual Assistants. So I have my own VA agency. And previously, I was also an executive assistant for entrepreneur and Wall Street Journal bestselling author Jeff Goins. So through that time, I saw the traditional side of the industry. And what is it like to work with a traditional publisher? What are the ups and downs? And even through being traditionally published, Jeff still had an assistant, he still had a team. So even if you are traditionally published, I know lots of indie authors talk about hiring VAs. You would be surprised how many traditionally published authors also have VAs. So something to keep in mind as well. So, really briefly, what is a virtual assistant, right? I know in the author world, you will hear the term virtual assistant loosely used. You might also hear people say PA, which stands for personal assistant. Administrative assistant is also used frequently. I prefer the term virtual assistant because it just covers a wide array of tasks an assistant can truly do for you, and they work virtually. So oftentimes, you think, oh, I want to hire an assistant. I have to hire someone in person. That's not necessarily the case, right? Nowadays, with remote work, you can, as you saw, work. I have worked with people all over the world, right? And so a virtual assistant is typically a 1099 contractor. They're not necessarily an employee. And that's important, right? Because oftentimes when you think of hiring, you're like, well, I have to do payroll taxes, and at what point do I have to pay them benefits? And it can just get really frustrating fast, but you can hire someone as a 1099 contractor and they can be paid an hourly rate, they can be paid a monthly retainer. That is completely up to you and your assistant, whatever agreement you have. And so I always try to mention that because when you think of hiring, it's like, oh my goodness, where do I even start, right? So keep that in mind. Most VAs are 1099 contractors. They work remotely and they can perform a variety of tasks, and we'll get into that here in a moment. Um, and they can also work for as small amount as 10 hours a month. So all of my clients, we start you at 10 hours a month if you've never had a virtual assistant before. Sometimes I will have clients come in and they're like, I know I need 40 hours a month, and we'll start them as there, right? I always mention this because you always think again when you hire someone, okay, I have to hire them for like part time. That's 20 hours a week. Oh my gosh, I don't even have 20 hours a week of work to give someone. And that's not always the case. You can start them on like a trial basis and say, hey, I'm going to give you a couple tasks. We're going to, I'm going to pay you a couple dollars, for each task. You set the amount. It really just depends. But I always love that about virtual assistants, that it's not a part-time employee or a full-time employee. I've had clients where I worked 5 hours a month for them, right? And it was still really crucial, helpful tasks. I always encourage folks start with 5 hours a month. I personally have found that's not necessarily going to move the needle in your business a huge amount. I've seen 10 hours a month. So you think, okay, that's 2.5 hours a week. That can really start to move the needle in your business for you, depending on what tasks they have, you have them doing. Rates for VAs are kind of a controversial topic, right? You will hear people say, especially Tim Ferriss, he always talks about he hired, VAs in the Philippines for $3 an hour to you will have on the higher end of things $50 an hour, right? Well, and we'll briefly get into this on how to go about setting your rates, or sorry, how to go about figuring out your budget. But the thing here you have to keep in mind is yes, you can hire someone for $3 an hour overseas, right? I have worked with VAs in the Philippines that are incredible and they are so reliable, so helpful, and yes, they're incredible. Um, $50 an hour though, that's when you tend to get assistants that will help you set up systems in your business. They're not just, waiting to be told what to do. When you find a VA that's $50 an hour, these are VAs that they are going to go find things to do. They are going to go find problems to fix in your business, right? So keep that in mind. I hate when people say, oh, you get what you pay for, because that's not always the case. I've worked with, again, VAs that I think should be paid more because worth their weight in gold for the tasks they're doing, the amount of heavy lifting they're doing in someone's business. But just keep that in mind, right? So again, that can be kind of confusing. How come I see VAs that are $3 an hour, but then I see some that are $50 an hour? In my experience, that's the difference, right? VAs that are on the lower end, you have to be telling them what to do each week or each month, right? VAs on the higher end, they are going to help you set up systems. They're going to help you manage projects. They're going to be more proactive, right? And so that's why they have a little bit of a higher rate. And I apologize, I'm going to move this here. There we go, much better. So here's the ever-evolving question. Well, what can I do, right? And what can a virtual assistant do? And there's so much out there that a virtual assistant can do, right? They can do social media, so creating posts, scheduling posts out. I've even worked with some indie authors where I've helped them with their launches, and I'm the one that's in the comments and in the DMs responding to questions, answering questions. If you do a special edition, people have questions about shipping, prices. You don't need to necessarily be the person answering those questions, right? You can have an assistant in your messages, emails, comments, answering those questions for you as you, right? So it again just depends on what you're comfortable with. Proofreading. If you know that you just need someone to quickly look at this email, this social media post, your manuscript really quick, they can absolutely do proofreading for you. Book launch management, so helping you launch your book. Facebook group management, right? Again, they can go into your Facebook group and post as you and respond to comments as you, or you can say, "Hello, everyone, this is my assistant. They're going to be helping me manage this Facebook group," and they can be responding to comments, posting things, managing things for you. Translation management. So again, with indies, I feel like this is becoming a bigger and bigger part of the publishing process is you publish your book in English, your native language, and now you want to translate it into other international markets, right? So Germany, the UK, whatever other markets you want to focus on, getting those translations or even those different editions of books into the other markets. You can absolutely have an assistant manage that for you. ARC team creation. So ARC stands for Advanced Reader Copies. This is your team that really helps you launch your book and provides reviews for your book, endorses your book, promotes your book for you. They can absolutely help you find ARC readers, distribute your ARCs, follow up. Hey, did you leave a review? Absolutely can hand something like that off to a VA. Customer service. So oftentimes, as Jane says, business of being a writer, it's not just book royalties that can keep you afloat these days, right? So oftentimes you'll see authors dive into other services, other products, merch. Your assistant can absolutely help you with that. Outreach. So getting on podcasts, getting featured in magazines, getting featured in different blog posts, reaching out to bookfluencers, right? With the rise of book talk, that's huge. You can absolutely have an assistant reach out for you and find people that fit who can be a really good, person to reach out to, and so much more. Did
Lorna,
you have,
yeah, quick question.
yeah,
Amy's wondering, especially on the social media side of things. So if does the assistant have full access to everything? They can read all your private messages. They can post anything they want. That sounds maybe um,
yeah.
makes one anxious.
Yes, absolutely. So, um, yes and no. Again, there's ways around this. So, oftentimes, with Meta, you can add people to your team, right? And they can only have specific access to specific things. Um, and again, like this is where building trust with your assistant is essential. And I harp on this with assistants over and over again. You have got to build trust. I saw another question earlier about NDAs, and yes. So, yes, you can have someone helping you with your social media and not be seeing your DMs. That is just a system you kind of have to set up with your assistant, right? So oftentimes I will use something like Buffer, Hootsuite, Metricool, some of these social media scheduling apps, they now have the ability where you can go in those apps themselves and respond to comments. You don't necessarily have to log into Instagram and see all the DMs and all the comments and such. There's ways around that. And so that's something that's really key as well with hiring a VA is this someone you can trust? And, majority of the time the answer is yes. And we'll get into that in a little bit too, as to how do you find someone that you can trust. So, but that's a really
Right.
great question. So,
Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, how do you find a virtual assistant, right? I always recommend folks start with your network, right? So if you know someone that has a virtual assistant that they rave about, ask them if they have openings and if they could take you on as well. I also will see this often with authors. Lots of assistants become really good at a certain genre. So you'll see assistants that work with lots of sci-fi authors, right? So they know where all the sci-fi readers are hanging out. They know where all the sci-fi authors are hanging out. They know where to find newsletter swaps. So if you want to promote your book on someone else's list and you'll promote theirs on your list, they know where to go to find those sci-fi authors. Same thing with romance assistants. So just start asking around. Just say, hey, I'm looking for a virtual assistant. Here's what I need help with. And you can kind of go from there. Because if a friend trusts this person, then typically, right, you can trust them as well. You can also start with various VA agencies. There's several out there. There's Belay. There's it's escaping my mind right now, but there's several agencies out there that will pair you with an assistant, right? And they are a little pricier because they help manage the middle parts of things. And so that's always a place to start as well. And you can always trust that these VAs are vetted, they're experienced. I know when I applied for various VA agencies, I had to do tests where it's like a job test. So put together an itinerary. How would you go about doing that, right? So typically they're vetted and they make sure that they are detail oriented and they know what they're doing, right? Fiverr and Upwork. So I say those with hesitation, right? Because again, that's where you're going to find some VAs that are on the lower end, fee wise. So you'll find VAs on Fiverr and Upwork for $5, $6 an hour. The reliability can be questionable, right? If you want a VA that can work with you long term, that can grow with you, I wouldn't necessarily start there. If you need a VA to just help you with a quick couple of projects and you don't have a huge budget and they're not projects that are like make or break, totally go check it out on there. I'm not against it. It's just one of those things again where you kind of have to be tread lightly because you're not sure their experience. You, of course, can see the reviews. Um, and I always just tell folks set your budget from the start, right? So take a look at your business finances. Scary, I know. But be honest with yourself of how much can I afford each month? Because you don't want to hire a VA and then get into the relationship 3 months in and things are going great and then all of a sudden you can't afford them anymore, right? That just it's not great for your progress in your business. So set your budget. If you can afford $200 a month to hire help, fantastic. You can absolutely find a VA to help you with a couple tasks here or there. If you realize you can afford more, maybe it's time to hire a part-time employee if you want that dedicated person on your team. I know lots of folks like just working with 1099 contract virtual assistants because there isn't as much of a commitment in the process. And so if you kind of have ebbs and flows with your business, you can find virtual assistants as well that are okay with, okay, I only have 5 hours a month for you, but the next month you might have 20 hours a month, right? So there's a couple, again, different places. I always recommend start with your network, ask around, especially if you have other author friends who have assistants, because oftentimes they're more than happy to refer their assistant to you. And again, assistants will have, multiple clients at a time to help make up their part of the income to make sure they can make a living off of it. Sometimes too, I also wanted to briefly mention I've heard some authors having really good success finding an assistant in their fan base that they already have. So, especially if you're a fiction author and you have multiple releases that you have a series or something, and you get those fans that are coming with you on your author career and your journey. I've heard some authors just they'll put it out there, hey, I'm looking for an assistant, virtual assistant, couple hours a month. Here are the tasks I need help with. Apply here. And that's great because then your assistant's already familiar with your work, they're already familiar with you, and they're already familiar somewhat with the publishing process, right? So that again is also an option. Okay, so this is a question I get all the time. How am I successful with a virtual assistant? Because of course, sometimes you hear the horror stories of I hired an assistant, I paid him $500 up front, they completely ghosted me, right? And yes, that can happen. And yes, it's frustrating, right? Um, Again, going back to referrals, does this person have someone that you can trust, right? Or sorry, does this person have references of that you can trust? And don't be afraid to ask for, can you let me know if you have clients that would be willing to just talk to me really quick or email me with me really quick. I know as a virtual assistant, I'm more than happy to provide those references. And I have happy clients that are more than happy to say, yes, like here's my experience and such. Overall though, how are you successful with a virtual assistant really comes down to expectations. Okay. So I always recommend starting with SOPs. So SOP is just a fancy word, fancy acronym for how do you get something done, right? So standard operating procedures. It's a military term. So when I worked with Dave Chesson from Kindlepreneur, publisher Rocket Atticus, we had SOPs for everything. And it's because he has a military background. And some people think, this is overkill, but it's not. And so if you create SOPs for your repeatable processes that you're going to be doing over and over again, and then you're able to hand that SOP off to an assistant, fantastic. You are setting yourself and your assistant up for success, right? I always joke that SOPs are also getting hit by a bus plan, right? You always hope you're not going to get hit by a bus, but it can happen. And you're at a commission. If you have SOPs, your assistant can step in and keep things moving and grooving, right? When I think it was, oh my gosh, December of 2022, I went to the ER because I thought I had food poisoning. One CAT scan later, they're like, "You're getting your appendix taken out tomorrow morning, promptly at 8:45 a.m." And I was like, "What? I just need some fluids and to go home. I don't want the surgery." And so I had to be out for a week and a half. My clients were able to keep things running because I was able to say, "Hey, I'm getting my appendix taken out. I'm going to be out for a bit. Here's where you can find everything. Here's where all the SOPs are. Here's how we send our newsletter. Here's how we respond to customer service emails. Here's how we do refunds." All that stuff. The more you document, the better, because it's going to create more consistency in not just your business, but for your assistant as well. And I know we always say systems and processes, and this is overwhelming for creatives often, and that's okay. So think about it this way. A system is the result of a process, right? So you have your writing system, your plotting system. This is how you write a book. But then you also have the process. So the process is the steps taken to create that specific result. So you'll have, again, your writing system, but the process of it might start with going to Pinterest and getting some inspiration and doing research, going to a library and checking out books on a specific topic. That part of your process, if you can document that, especially for repeatable processes, that is fantastic. And being able to hand those off to an assistant before you hire them is really key. You're basically making it impossible for them to either mess up or just not do things, not get things done, right? The other thing I always try to tell people is have realistic expectations. I think the term virtual assistant has become a little jaded in in the tech world the past few years because you'll always hear people say, I hired a virtual assistant and they changed my business and I was able to 10x my income overnight. And it gets a little crazy because, have realistic expectations of your assistant because that's going to, again, set you up for success and them up for success, right? I always talk about, think about the best boss that you ever had. And typically that person had realistic expectations, right? And even more so, they had verbal expectations or written expectations. So I know all the great bosses I've had or great clients I've had. I knew exactly what they wanted me to help them with, and I had the tools to do the job, and I knew exactly how they wanted it done. Sometimes you might have a task that you want to hand off and you're like, I don't care how you do it, just get it done. That's okay. Communicate that to your assistant, right? I've had that lots of times where my clients are overwhelmed, they're exhausted, they're stressed, and they're like, hey, I just need you to do XYZ. I don't care how you go about doing it. I trust you. Just go get it done. And I'm like, got it. Sounds good. Communicating your preferences is really key too, right? So I know when I started working with Dave, I would book a lot of his travel. And he said upfront, I want a window seat. If you can get me a window seat, I'm willing to pay the extra 20 bucks. And I was like, perfection. Can totally do that, no problem. But he communicated that expectation to me and that preference to me, right? You're not a evil, mean Miranda Priestley from The Devil Wears Prada boss. This is being kind to your assistant. So, again, using project management systems to communicate is also super clear. You can use Trello, you can use ClickUp, you can use Asana. I'm a huge Notion fan. I have a Notion template that I've created specifically for authors with authors and their assistants in mind. But using a project management system to communicate the task to your assistant is also great. So just keep in mind, how can you set your assistant up for success, right? Just saying, go book me a flight to Peru. Okay, but do you prefer to leave in the morning? Do you prefer to leave in the evening? And yes, it can be bumpy at first when you're setting up things with your VA because you know, it's like exhausting, right? To be communicating some of these things, but communicating them up front is going to set you up for success long term. So, super key to keep in mind. When you start to think about what am I going to outsource, I want you to keep this in mind as well. That CEO does not stand for Chief of Everything Officer. So you cannot do all the things, right? So I want you to start thinking about the tasks that you hate doing, the tasks that you literally dread and procrastinate. Writing doesn't count. But the tasks that you are just like, I would rather gouge my eyeball out with a spoon than do my bookkeeping right now, right? Start to think about those things because you have to think about the energy you spend in your business, right? So you want your energy to go towards things that are moving the needle in your business. And for oftentimes with authors, it's writing more books, right? The bigger your backlist, the better chance you have of getting more readers, selling more books, more royalties, etc. Whatever those tasks are that really truly only you can do or you truly enjoy doing, keep those close to you. But the tasks that you hate doing, start thinking about how you can outsource those, right? You will notice that CEOs of businesses, they are not doing the bookkeeping. They are not answering phones at the front desk. They are making those key decisions, moving the business forward, or they are helping with the process of creating the next product, creating the next service. And for authors, the next product is the next book. Or for editors, it's what's the next service that I can offer, right? I always love this quote because it's from the co-founder of LinkedIn. It says, no matter how brilliant your mind or strategy, if you're playing a solo game, you'll always lose out to a team. And so that's from Reid Hoffman. And I love that because all the successful authors I know did not do it alone. They sometimes it's not even an assistant. They had a brilliant editor or they had a brilliant cover designer or they had someone who was like their project manager, right? And you have to start understanding that your capacity is going to hit a ceiling and that's where your revenue is going to hit that ceiling as well. That's where your output is going to hit that ceiling as well. So you just have to really keep that in mind. So again, start with the stuff that you hate doing, right? How can you outsource that to a virtual assistant? Maybe sometimes it's like personal tasks. I know someone said setting up appointments. 100% you can outsource that to an assistant. Maybe you hate formatting, and maybe it's time to, use something like Vellum or Atticus and hire someone to format your books for you. Your editing, your cover design, whatever those tasks are that just drain you, think about outsourcing those first, right? And if you can put a system in place or those preferences and expectations in place, have them documented, it becomes so much easier to delegate those things. So, we're going to have time for questions here. Really briefly, my virtual assistant agency is Moonstone Virtual Assistants. If you want to know more, my website is www.lornakbailey.com. Even if you're at the place that you can't quite afford to hire a virtual assistant, I have some resources on my website that are free that can start help you getting those systems and processes in place and can really start to help you document those things, right? I have my Notion template. I have some checklists, all the fun, nerdy project management things on there. I've got lots of resources on there. So don't get stuck. Definitely check out my website. I've got some um, awesome, like free resources on there as well. So, yeah. All right.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Lorna.
Yeah.
We do have quite a number of interesting questions that I think will help you elaborate on what you
Okay.
do and how people can do this effectively.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with Judy's uh, question because you talked about how this is going to go much better if you have some standard operating procedures. And so Judy asks, well, can the assistant help create the standard operating procedures?
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I've had people hire me before and they're like, "Oh my gosh, my inbox is a dumpster fire." And I'm like, "I don't care. Like, I throw me into the dumpster fire. It's okay." And yes, you can totally hire someone and just have them like co-create those SOPs for, like with you. And oftentimes too, it's kind of like help you can hire an assistant to kind of help you get those things out of your head and onto paper. And just make it messy, right? You can start with a Google Doc or a Word document. Google Docs are great because then you can share them with folks and they're just more accessible. But absolutely, you can just have that co-creation process together where you're creating your SOPs for sure.
So, a related question. Someone's wondering how much time it takes to prep and organize to hand things off. This person
Mm,
doesn't feel like they're organized enough to figure it out
yeah.
what to outsource. So
Yeah.
if that's the case, then what would you recommend as a first step?
So again, if you like hire an assistant and you're honest with them, a majority of times VAs are okay with that. Like they're like, okay, let's figure it out together. The thing you'll need to do on your end is come up with your top three tasks. So for my onboarding process with my clients, I will say, come to our first onboarding call with the three things that you want help with, right? And like these are oftentimes the three things that are stressing you out the most. Um, and I usually tell clients too, the first month really is finding out your preferences, getting your VA access to things. Okay, I need the password to this. How are we going to share passwords? How are we going to communicate? Setting up those kind of standards. And then the second month is truly getting those systems put in place where it is like, okay, you're helping me with this, and this is how we're going to go about doing it. And it is a little messy and it can be just kind of uncomfortable, I think is a good word for it. But by the third month, usually you're moving and grooving, right? And
Mhm.
you've got things set in place. Your VA has expectations, you have expectations of them. They know what to expect from you. And it is a little messy at first, but once you kind of get used to each other and you get, more comfortable with your VA, oftentimes you're throwing all the things off your plate at them, like, help me with everything. So, yeah, it is a little uncomfortable and messy at first, but that is part of the process, especially if you're not a naturally organized person. But don't be afraid to let your assistant help you with that part too. And people are always like, ashamed, I think, like ashamed of how unorganized they are. And for creatives, that is so normal. And it's not it's not a moral failure, I think is a good way to put it, right? So don't be afraid of that. And I have seen some inboxes and I have seen some things and um never once though am I I'm usually sympathetic, right? I'm like, this person has been doing so much for so long. Let's find them some relief, you know?
Yeah. Now, if you're in this position where you're really hoping for a more hands-on onboarding, you don't necessarily have yet the SOPs and you're a little bit unsure, would you
Yeah.
expect to be paying a higher rate to that sort of VA?
I would say so typically, yes, because typically the higher rate VAs are going to have processes to help you onboard already. And those VAs you're looking at like 30, 40, $50 an hour. And so they have their systems in place to help you get systems in place, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
can seem kind of meta, but yeah. But I will say too, if you have someone you can't afford a lot, that's okay. Just be honest with them and say, hey, would you be willing to kind of help me get organized here and create some systems and get some systems in place? So if you can find that person, that's fantastic too. And just be honest with them about your budget.
Kathleen is wondering if a VA can organize email in Outlook and also documents in Word.
Yes. Yes. I would say email management is like the thing I've done, not the most necessarily, but it's the most common task that
Hmm.
I've taken on.
Hmm.
And you can set up systems too where, um, like one of my favorite things to do is when I start working with someone and they're a very busy person and they're a person that is very accessible and they need to not be as
Mm,
accessible.
yeah.
We'll set up a separate inbox for them that's like a secret inbox. And then I can step in and take care of like the super busy inbox. And we'll have a weekly meeting where it's like, hey, this person who's kind of a big deal, they reached out, like, I'm gonna send this one to your secret inbox. Um, I love that because then the client is like, oh my gosh, I have 3 emails a day. And one was from my aunt. And then the other two were like people I genuinely enjoy working with. So setting up those systems is always like really fun for me. I geek out about it. But yeah, absolutely they can help you with email. I have res I won't say who, but there's been lots of clients that I have responded as them. So people don't know that it's me responding. But I get to know them well enough. Um, so Marion, just a disclaimer, she responds to all her own emails. It's if Marion emails you, it's her. But one of her preferences, this is a good example, never use exclamation points ever. And that is because of her journalism background, right? Like exclamation points to Marion are absolute no-no. And that's something I learned about her working together is she's like, if you are writing copy for me or if we're, communicating to customers, we do not use exclamation points. And I was like, well, I'm glad you said that because I'm an exclamation point emoji lover. So that's great to know. But I also have like listened to clients' podcasts too to kind of how do they talk? How do they respond? What are phrases they use frequently? And I'll like study that a little bit and just get to know how do they respond to emails really quick, short, quippy?
Hmm.
Are they a little more drawn out? Your VA can totally start to do that for you. So it's kind of scary, honestly, sometimes how good VAs can get.
Kathleen is also wondering, what does it mean when a VA is AI powered?
Yeah, okay, yes, I'm glad you asked that. So that means from what I understand, is there's typically a knowledge base that AI pulls from, right? So if you like go on to, I've seen like major banking websites, they'll have like AI powered chatbots, right? Or AI powered virtual assistants. And then basically you'll go in there, ask them questions, ask them to perform certain things like, hey, I just need a refund on this. And that AI powered virtual assistant has the capacity and ability to perform those tasks and pull from that knowledge base. So it's very powerful. Again, it's gonna kind of just have to wait and see how powerful it can be. But yes, you can totally experiment with that, look at that, depending on whatever work it is that you are needing help with. If you have an AI virtual assistant, they can help you with some of those tasks too. So, yeah, take some training, just like with any assistant.
Right.
But yeah,
Yes.
totally an option.
You noticed earlier that someone asked a question about NDAs. And so Mary
Yes.
Jo is wondering, is there a way to create NDAs for the VA to sign, or how is that handled generally?
Yeah, totally. That's a really good question. So yes, I've signed plenty of NDAs before. And I think it's, if it's something that would provide more security for you, go for it. The NDAs I've signed typically have been prepared by a lawyer, and my client is the one who initiates that. So, I've worked for several folks who have software, right? And as their assistant, I'm going to have access to the secret sauce of the software. And so I sign an NDA saying, I will protect that. That is your information, and I will not share that. And so having a lawyer, of course, prepare that is always
Mm,
great to make sure your bases are covered. But no, that's absolutely something totally okay to do. And especially with authors, I think it's a good idea to have because your assistant is going to have access to some things that are pretty sensitive. So I think that is a good idea to do especially if it makes you feel more comfortable.
yeah.
Yeah.
Leslie asks, are there VAs who can manage ad campaigns on Amazon and Meta or elsewhere? Well.
Yes. Yes. So again, this kind of goes back to having the right realistic expectations, right? So I think I've seen some people hire VAs and they're like, they're going to run all my Facebook ads and it's going to be great. But then that VA doesn't have experience running Facebook ads, and that's kind of a very unique skill set. It's one that takes a lot of studying, a lot of experimentation, a lot of knowledge, and then it doesn't go well. So again, that's why I recommend if you have your Facebook ad system in place and your Amazon ads systems in place and you're willing to train your assistant on that, go for it. I always do recommend though, ads can be a very expensive process, right? And so I always recommend folks, if you truly are not sure on how they're to be run, don't hire a virtual assistant for that kind of task. That's something I would go hire a Facebook ads agency or an AMS agency for. But again, if you have there's some authors, they are willing to sit down, figure out that skill, have it figured out, know what works, what doesn't work. Totally, like you can hire a VA and train them on that. But yeah, emphasis on the well, right? So
Yeah.
they can do reports, manage things, but some really unique skill sets like that, that's where it can get a little frustrating, I think, for clients is they're like, this is not going well. And it's like, well, did your assistant have the experience and knowledge to do that particular skill?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's one of the ones I do say, if you're really wanting that done well and you're not wanting to spend the time learning it yourself, I would hire out to an agency.
Yeah. For those who don't know, I just did a session last month with Jeff Affleck, who specializes just in Amazon ad campaign management. And for those who
Yeah.
are curious about how you would get started on your own to learn it yourself, you can go to my YouTube channel and study up a little, and maybe you will gain the knowledge to train someone to oversee it for you. All right. Emily says, I read that your budget for a virtual assistant should be a quarter of your own hourly rate. It feels arbitrary, but I also
Mhm.
understand needing to make sure it's worth the investment. Thoughts?
Okay, I haven't heard that one before. But I see what the person means. So essentially, if your hourly rate is $100 an hour, your budget for your VA should be $25 an hour, from what I understand. Um, Again, look at your numbers, right? So you might be charging $100 an hour, but is that in your budget to pay a VA $25 an hour, right? I think if you have some revenue to spend, that's a good place to start. And again, it's so different as to what each person's comfortable being able to afford. But if you really wanting to invest in a higher end VA, I say $25 an hour is a good mid-range to start
Mm,
for those VAs that are going to be able to really step in and help you build systems and processes. So yeah, that's a good um, rule of thumb. I haven't heard that one before. And again, I am wary of those because each person's so different, right?
yeah. Kelly asks, can a trusted VA dig into your finances and figure out your profitability, suggest cost cutting, like looking at how much you're spending on things like rarely used subscriptions? If I had a real workflow for creating marketing materials, I could cancel so many of these apps.
Oh gosh, yeah, I get that. The software costs can very much creep up. Um, Yes. So I only hesitate because, when you get into finances and accounting, it can be a little tricky.
Mhm.
But VAs, I've done bookkeeping for folks, and so that might be something where you give them your statements and they do go through and they're like, hey, you're paying for Zoom twice a month. Like, did you know that? You can absolutely have them do that for sure. As far as like giving you, and I don't think this is what the question was saying, but like giving you financial advice on like, hey, you should pay down your business credit card. Like that's something you should really go to an accountant for. But yeah, absolutely. Like little tasks like that, that are so annoying and you don't want to spend the time doing, totally hand those off to your VA. So reconciling credit card statements, all that. If you train them and your VA is willing to absolutely go for it.
Yeah. Jan asks for VAs outside the US. She says some are with agencies, some are solo. She says she's getting contacted by such people all the time through LinkedIn direct messages,
Mhm.
and they seem legit, but how do I evaluate?
Yes, so that's one of the things where it's tricky. Um, Read reviews online. Rider Beware is a great place to go for, agencies out there that are not great, right? You can go on there and write reviews. Trustpilot, you know, kind of good place to start. Really do your research, right? Because someone may say they have an agency, but really it's just them and another person, and
Mhm.
they don't have the experience. They built a great website. Just if something feels off, don't do it. Trust your gut on it. But researching, reading reviews, asking them for references, if they are not willing to give you references, huge red flag, especially with agencies. And if they have, anyone can throw a testimonial up on a website.
Yeah.
Being able to talk to someone that has worked with this person and being able to ask them genuine questions, that's great. You can also ask too for a trial, right? So, hey, can we do a trial period? That's very common with agencies. I usually do a 3-month trial period because sometimes the assistant's not a good fit, or sometimes the assistant this doesn't want to do the work, right? I have steps in my process to make sure that doesn't happen, but it can happen. And so if they're willing to do a trial period, that's great too. But really do your research. And don't be afraid to start small, giving them tasks where it's like if they mess it up or they don't do it, it's not going to throw off your whole book launch and start to build that relationship. That's totally okay to do too.
I really like the advice to actually talk to some other clients because I know from that sometimes people use my name to imply an endorsement or a testimonial where none exists. It's just
Yes.
like outright lying. And I've also
Yes.
seen websites that are blanketed in testimonials, but I happen to know none of them are real.
Yep.
So be very careful out there is my message here. They
Yeah.
know how to appear legitimate. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, there are a lot of bad actors out there.
Yes, totally.
Okay, Leslie is wondering about some of the tasks you discussed related to social media in particular. Does this require the author to provide content? Um, and she's also wondering, so often authors are told to share more personal stuff on social media, like,
Yeah,
pics of your daily walk or your pets. And
right.
so is do you actually post personal content for people, or do you come up with it yourself? How does that
Yeah.
work?
So I've done both. You're not gonna like the answer to this question. It's up to you. There's a lot of like faceless authors out there, authors who write with pen names
Yeah.
and have literally never posted a single thing about their personal life, right? Or maybe they post a picture of their dog, which is a very non-identifying part of your life, right? And so it depends on your strategy. So if you are someone who does want to post more personal parts of your life, maybe you post like 3 days a week, and then your assistant though posts content from your books the other 3, 4 days of the week, or reviews of your books, or about, something about your characters. Like there's so many different directions you
Mhm.
could go with it, and it really depends on. I always tell authors, I'm like, look at who's in your genre and what's working well for other authors who are killing it with social media, right? Um, I had one author though who was completely faceless and she was a cozy mystery author, and we set her up a system where we would pull hooks from her books. So when I say hook, for social media specifically, like a cliffhanger scene or a scene where it's like, oh my gosh, we find the dead body, the whodunit scene, right? Not spoilery content necessarily, but just those things that hook you in. You'll see it on TikTok a lot. Pulled all those hooks from her book. She helped me a little bit, and then we created some like Canva templates for her, and she was good to go. She can kind of mix and match and do that. So that's also an option too. I've had authors too where I help them with a launch. They send me a copy of the book. I go in, I pull all the hooks out. They approve the hooks, make sure nothing's like spoilery or stuff they just don't want on social media. Approve the hooks, and then I'll go in, create templates, and we can kind of go from there. So, you don't have to show your face on social media if you don't want to. There's lots of pen name authors that do great on social media. And it just really depends on your strategy and what you're comfortable with. But you can always come up again with a system where like you're posting 3 days a week, pictures of your kids, your dogs, like whatever makes sense. And then the other 3, 4 days is content from your books, upcoming launches, other authors you want to promote, things like that. So, yeah.
Makes sense. So this kind of gets into publicity territory, of course, and someone's wondering if VAs work with publicists or in place of publicists. And building on
Mm.
that question, what kinds of contacts do VAs typically have in terms of influencers, podcast hosts, media, etc.?
Yeah, that's a super good question. So, I think hiring a VA for publicity, you're really hiring them to do a lot of the heavy lifting, right? So actually sending out emails, actually finding people to reach out to, following up on those emails, getting interviews booked. I would keep that in mind, right? Because I've worked with authors so long, I have a list of like people that I'm like, if you want to be on podcasts and talk about writing, or if you're an entrepreneur and you want to talk about this, I have this list of podcasts I go to. Um, I do have that list of contacts. And I think that is always a good practice to have is, especially if you're an author or someone wanting to really get out there, having that list of podcasts that you can pitch yourself to, or have your VA pitch you to. You can have your VA pitch as you, or you can have your VA pitch as themselves. So say, hey, hi, I'm assistant to so and so. I'd like you to consider,
Mhm.
so and so for your podcast. So, yeah, publicity agencies though are gonna have bigger contacts, I will say. So, like Good Morning America, The Today Show.
Mhm.
Keep in mind, hiring a VA, they're probably not gonna have those
Yeah,
contacts. Those like really heavy hitters, they're probably gonna be more like mid to low level reach. Yeah, like those are my contacts. Like I have some booktubers that I will pitch to and know me and my clients and but they're not like Mr. Beast status on YouTube necessarily.
right,
So,
right.
yeah, I would keep that in mind.
Well, I imagine a terrific research task that you could give a VA is figuring out what podcasts you should be on, but basing it
Mhm.
on comp authors or comp titles and finding the
Yeah,
influencers and all of that legwork.
absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so we have a couple questions related to research, actually. One comes from a ghostwriter of nonfiction memoir. They're attempting to scale a bit so they can work on multiple projects at once. Other than getting help with research, this ghostwriter can never figure out how to employ a VA consistently. Uh, do you have any ideas? What tasks come to mind what would you help a ghostwriter with aside from some research?
Yeah. That's a really good question. Project management, so staying on task. I do that all the time for authors where I'm like, are you writing? Did you hit your writing goal? Like seriously. And I have had clients before that are like, if I text you before 11 a.m., yell at me because I should be writing and not doing admin stuff. And I'm like, got it, sounds good.
So
Like
accountability, you provide accountability.
absolutely. Oh, yes. Yeah, totally. Like, and even too, like, I'll have clients message me on the weekends and I'm like, you're supposed to be at your kid's church program today. Like, get off your phone. If I have that level of relationship with them, I will absolutely call them out. And they're like, you're right, Um, yeah, accountability for sure, because, ghostwriting it's a monumental task, right? Totally could help you with research, proofreading. So, hey, can you quick read through this? If you have a VA who is, more literature savvy, grammar savvy, you can totally have them help you with that. Just like hitting those deadlines too of like, we need to communicate to the client by this time. We are at this level of written work, helping you stay on track with that. Keeping in touch and like meeting for the week of like, hey, you know, I need to find some more clients, drum up some more clients. Can you do some outreach? Can I go on some podcasts? Can I, write a blog post? Whatever that is. It totally can help you with like the accountability side of things and the research side of things. And again, go back to like, what are those tasks that someone else can do that you hate doing? Like that is taking up so much of your time. Totally think about outsourcing some of that too.
Since we're approaching summer, someone is saying, this is Sarah, sometimes I need someone to take care of the personal stuff, like, can you have your VA organize the summer camps?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah, so that's realistic. You can have them do the little personal things that,
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah. And I will say this, be upfront with your VA about that because some VAs don't like doing the personal tasks. It's
okay,
not that it's like beneath them, but I know a lot of VAs rather enjoy helping people progress in their business. And
okay.
so they want to be focused on that. But when I started out as a VA, I ordered Chipotle for people to be delivered to their house. Dave's dog, Atticus, I helped him find that dog.
Oh my
Seriously.
God.
I researched the breeders, I got the references, I read the reviews, the bloodline, like all of that. He handed off to me. He's like, I want to find a family dog. And I love dogs, so I was more than happy to help him with it. But yeah, I that's one thing I take credit for. So you can totally have them help you with kids' summer camps. Just be upfront though, again, because some VAs are like really don't enjoy those tasks for whatever reason. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So we have a variety of questions that are kind of a potpourri of will a VA do this? Will they do that? Will they use this tool? Like, can they help set up a podcast? Can they make trailers? Would they use Microsoft Teams for project management? And I imagine
Yeah.
the answer is probably. And as
Yes.
long as you set that expectation, like that's what I want you to help me with.
Yeah, and also too, like knowing, I think some people will look at a VA and they'll say, "Oh, but they're not familiar with this tool." That's okay. That doesn't mean that VA can't learn that tool. Like I'll have clients come to me and they're like, "Hey, I want to start implementing QuickBooks online. Have you ever used QuickBooks?" And this is just an example. I will say, no, I haven't, but I'm more than happy to spend time learning it. And I won't charge you for that hours because I want to have that tool in my tool belt. Right. So it's another skill your VA can learn. Fantastic. Or if it's a software they haven't used before, they can totally, take the time to learn it if they're
Yeah.
willing. So
So
keep
yeah,
that in mind too.
that actually touches on another question that got asked is if the VA needs to get some training to be able to do something, do you pay for that training or do they do it on their own dime?
Yeah, it depends. I've had instances where if it's like a very specific software I know I probably won't use with another client,
Mm.
it's for a specific project, I will say, "Hey, this is going to be billable hours." Majority of the time, well, I've never had a client not be okay with that.
Yeah.
Um, but again, that just kind of depends. I would say if it's like a really basic software like Microsoft Teams or Canva, the VA should really be taking that on. But if
Right.
it is a very specific to you and your work, I would consider as a courtesy that needs to be billable hours for you. So, yeah, just depends.
Terrific. All right, we've reached our time. This has been a fantastic and insightful session, Lorna. I am so grateful for you coming on today. And Tiffany is saying in the chat, I just want to say how I appreciate your backdrop. The Hello Kitty is especially fun.
Oh my gosh, yes. Well, I have two nieces and a nephew. They're all under the age of 12 and they love to get me stuffies. And so, what better place to put them? I have a Squishmallow, an Animal Crossing character. They're all up there. They keep things happy and fun. So, yeah. And thank you so much, Jane and Mark, and everyone in the chat. I had an amazing time with you all today. And thank you again, Jane, for letting me share and just be able to connect and yeah, hopefully we got some minds churning about getting some help
Yeah.
out there and kind of, moving forward and making progress. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. And thank you
Great.
all for coming. And I hope to see you at another class soon. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye bye.